The twist that I provide to my clients and that I talk about regularly in my writing and on my podcast is the importance of asking questions and really qualifying, is this someone I can help? And is this someone that can help me? And if so, can I test them out? Like, can I say, hey, I'm going to give you this contact, and then they're going to offer me a contact. And did they follow up? Did they actually execute on the things that they had promised? It's like the Seinfeld, you're a Seinfeld fan. It's like the car rental company. They took the reservation, but you didn't keep the reservation. And that's kind of the most important part. There are people who are excellent at organization and following through and doing what they say. And then you start to realize there's a whole segment of the population that's really, really bad at that skill. And that skill is pretty important, because if you're looking for someone that's going to routinely refer you and that you're going to be able to refer back, you want someone that's organized enough to do it properly.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for being here and welcome to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. Great guest today, Steve Fretzin. And if you haven't listened to his podcast, he's awesome and he's going to have some great stuff for us today. Before I start with Steve, I'm going to share my screen, see if this works out. For those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see our speakers for TGR Live Growth Strategies for Law Firms event. I just want to talk for 1 minute about this. And for those of you who've been listening to the podcast, you know I'm super excited. We have an awesome world-class speaker lineup. Mike Morse Law Firm. Charlie Mann is going to do his $500,000 referral playbook. Andy Sievers, the founder of Case Status, the #1 new software. Justin Lovely, the AI attorney's back. Jason Melton, Raquel Gomez from Staffy. Ben Glass just wrote a new book called No BS Time Management. I got his book right here with Dan Kennedy, who's a legend of marketing. Ed Kirk from Supio. This is a super hot new AI for law firms. Greg Crabtree, Jeff Hampton, Ben Leader. I mean, this is an amazing lineup that I'm so proud that we're going to have at TGR Live. Without any more commercials, I hope you all can join me. You can find a link for it on our homepage at 10goldenrules.com, TEN goldenrules.com. And we'd love to see you at the event. It's March 10th and 11th, and it's in beautiful Delray Beach, Florida. We've got an awesome location too. It's the Opal Grand Hotel right down on the beach. So it's right down on the ocean. So if y'all are watching this from somewhere up in the north, you're definitely going to want to join us. It's March 10th and 11th. It should be the most beautiful time of the year to be in beautiful South Florida. And Delray, by the way, is just between Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. So it's right adjacent to our hometown, Boca Raton. Anyway, Steve, thanks for letting me do a short commercial for that event. Everyone can see I'm super excited about this event coming up. And if you're listening to sometime in the future, we'll hope to see you at TGR Live 2026. So it'll be an annual event. You'll join us in the future.
There we go. All right.
Steve, thank you very much for being here. Let me just do a quick intro. I listened to the Be That Lawyer podcast, and Steve and I were introduced by a mutual friend. He's also a business coach for lawyers, and he covers a wide range of topics on his podcast. And one thing he's really specialized in and really, really great at is teaching lawyers how to generate business without selling. Steve, welcome to the 10 Golden Rules podcast.
Thank you, Jay. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to an engaging and entertaining segment for you here.
Yeah, hey, I'm fired up. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you started a podcast and your coaching business.
Sure. I appreciate that. So I'm a non-lawyer who got pulled into the legal space in the recession of 2008 and never thought in a million years I'd work with lawyers. I worked with everyone else except lawyers, teaching sales-free selling, which I came up with about 23 years ago. And my first book is titled that. The idea being that you don't have to sell and convince and pitch to go out and develop business. There's much more relationship, consultative methodologies to use that are going to make everybody feel good and bring in the business. So that kind of took off, and I ended up just starting off working with lawyers and law firms, then ended up with the pandemic, working exclusively with individual attorneys all over the country and now all over the world. And podcast is almost 5 years old, but coming up on 500 episodes. That's been an amazing journey. I go back occasionally and listen to the first 20 just to kind of realize how far I've come from a standpoint of not only the guests that I'm interviewing, and you'll be on my show soon enough, Jay, but also the The quality of the engagement. And I've just become very, very good at the interviews. And I hopefully am good on this side too, being asked questions. But it's a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, the goal is to help engage attorneys in the things they never learned in law school, right? The soft skills, the business skills that they came out and really, most of them are just trying to figure it out through sheer force and effort versus methodologies and systems and processes, which, as we all know, are much better ways to go.
So it's less about lawyering and more about running the business when you're a lawyer.
Yeah, the podcast in my business is all about business development and growth and just trying to find the best ways to invest time without burning through it, because that's what, the billable hour is, right? We've got to find ways to be efficient with our time.
Let's talk about the podcast for a minute. Why did you start a podcast? How easy is it to start a podcast? And give folks who are thinking about this format a couple tips.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. I was on a lawyer friend of mine's podcast, and at the end of the, and I thought it was great. And then at the end of it, I said to her, I go, how much time does this take? And what are you doing with editing and production? She goes, I'm going to stop you right there. I don't do any of it. I show up, I do 30 minutes and I'm done. Everything else is done for me. And I said, yes, please. So that was it. I was right from that moment, I hired her production company. I've been with them ever since. I have a marketing director who does the social media side of it and the videos and the graphics, but the production's all done through Turnkey Podcast out of LA. Shout out to Turnkey. So the beauty of it is people think it's about content creation, and yeah, that's important, but it's the relationships, the people that I've got to meet through the podcast that would never take a meeting with me because I'm just going to sell them something or whatever they think's going to happen. And instead it's like, no, I'm going to bring you on my show. I'm going to engage you. I'm going to make you look good. And by the way, you're going to share so much value and we're going to build a relationship during that process. And then there's next steps and things that happen that are truly amazing. But I think the combination of the relationships and the business that can be generated and the amount of content that can be used and also repurposed, it's really unbelievable. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you enjoy meeting people and have the gift of gab and you enjoy talking and asking questions and trying to get the goods out of somebody, podcasting is an excellent way to go.
Yeah, I love it. And I was lucky enough to start way, way back in the early days of podcasting.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say I interviewed Jason Calacanis before he had a podcast, and he now has the All In podcast. And he's saying it's the #1 podcast in the world by some measure. Interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk when he worked in his dad's wine store. And he now has this massive social media following. So I'm an OG when it comes to podcast interviews. So let's see how you do.
And the only way I can one up you is I used to wrestle Joe Rogan. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I didn't do that.
No. A butt kicking, looking for a place to happen.
There we go.
That's awesome. Yeah, Rogan does some great stuff. And I mean, there's some great podcasts, like long form podcasts. There was recently an 8-hour podcast with Elon and the team at Neuralink.
Oh my God.
Just phenomenal. And Rogan definitely moved the needle on the election with 2-3 hour podcasts with Elon and with Donald Trump. And the Democrats declined to send their candidate. So,
well, it shows the power of social media and the power of podcasting is that you can get on TV, but you're not getting the same size of an audience that a podcast, and the fact that they're hyper focused on the words you're saying and the interview that's being conducted versus, I know, like I watch people watch TV and typically they watch TV, but then they have their phone on in front of them. So it's like a double screen. I don't know that my family's the only one that does it. But sometimes I look around and I go, what the hell's going on here? Everybody's looking at a screen through a screen. It's really, and even the kids, they have like one thing on one half of their screen and then another. Like, it's really weird how we need all this distraction to sort of stay focused. It doesn't make sense, but anyway, but podcast is that you definitely get the full attention.
Yeah, I've got 3 screens here on my setup, my home business setup. And there's almost always something going on this screen, a podcast or a sports game or something like that, depending on how intensive work I'm doing. Like, so if I'm writing or if I'm doing a presentation, I'll have classical music and it actually helps me. And then one thing I learned from podcasting is there's a certain number of people, and those of you listening, Steve and myself, we're what's called auditory learners. And auditory learners, about 25% of the population, who'd prefer to listen to an audiobook than read it, who like podcasts and get it. And then the other 75%, yeah, sure, they're going to download a few of the more entertainment-based podcasts and whatnot. But those folks are more likely to read a blog or read a book to get educated than to actually go search out podcasts on a certain topic. So I like little classical music when I have a deadline, improves my efficiency.
Nice.
Despite what my mom used to say when I was studying, she'd say, turn off your radio. Well, it turns out that was not the best play. And as soon as she left, I turned the radio back on because
Yeah.
I'm more effective. So sales free selling, I love that. That's a great hook. Attorney growth. Tell me about your sales free selling training. I know part of it's a class and one-on-one training, and it helps attorneys build strategic partnerships. Share the philosophy behind this approach and why it works so well with lawyers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Essentially, this is the anti-sales methodology. So people that feel like they have to go out and network to sell their services, or they have to go meet people and convince them to send them work, or whatever it is that people have in their heads that has to happen. And lawyers, quite frankly, call it, hey, I'm going on a pitch meeting. I mean, it's right there in the sentence of what they're going to do. And it's all wrong. It's all backwards. The way that people buy and the way that people sell, they're both sort of broken models. So what this does is it says, look, we're not going to allow people to buy from us where they just take our information, our price, our free consulting and use us and leverage our time for nothing. And we're also not going to go in and hard sell somebody and convince them, hey, you're a square peg, but I'm going to jam a round peg through you. We need to come up with something that's going to end up being a win-win. That's going to be a fit for both parties. So there's a methodology where we follow a series of steps, almost like from a bottom of a stairwell to the top. And if you touch every step, you end up with a predictable outcome. The outcome is going to be new business, and it's going to be not price driven, but emotionally generated because we all agree there's value here. Or we're going to maybe move it to a quick no. And people go, well, Steve, we don't want no's. No's are bad. And I go, no, no's are great. Because if you understand why someone is a no, because they can't afford you, or because they're not the decision maker, or for a variety of reasons, the timing is off, then moving someone to a quick no could be the best thing for both parties from a standpoint of everyone's time. So it's really about efficiency and how do we learn and understand about somebody in a way that's going to demonstrate that, hey, we could work well together. Let's figure it out as a team versus I'm up against you and it's competitive. So it's really taking away all the competitiveness and the salesiness out of any engagement and that could go from a networking meeting to a prospective client meeting to trying to meet someone that's a center of influence somewhere.
Yeah, I love a no in sales. See, I like a yes better, but I prefer a no to a, well, let me think about it, or send me the proposal, because that burns a lot of negative energy. If you're always constantly reaching out and checking in and, hey, let's say no, let's agree to meet up again in 3 months, 6 months, and let's keep the positive energy going in the right places. So
I even share with attorneys that they should let prospective clients know, like up front, that no is okay, that we don't have to play games and we don't have to kind of circle around the elephant in the room. If this is a fit, let's talk about next steps. If this is not a fit, let's just be honest with each other. We can stay friends. There's no issue there, but we don't have to play games and we can just move forward. And then when someone agrees to that, it takes all the stress out of the meeting and we can just relax and just let the system take over and figure out what's going to happen.
I love it. Yeah, sometimes people call it the upfront agreement.
Yeah, an upfront agreement. That's another great way of saying it. Yeah.
Love it. What's a tip you would have for someone just starting out with a firm? What's a great networking strategy for someone just starting out with a young firm?
That's, yeah, great question. The first thing I always try to talk to people about is just writing a simple plan for yourself. The idea that I'm new at a firm and I'm going to obviously have to learn the law and be a good lawyer. That's number one. And then beyond that, I need to develop a network. I need to develop referral partners and people that can send stuff to me. And I need to be in a position to also add value for them. It's never a one-way street, or rarely a one-way street. So the idea that we're going to take the time to write a 1 or 2 page plan, that might be all it needs to be. But in that plan, we're going to talk about, like, what do we want to accomplish as the overarching goal or objective? We're going to talk about what's the lowest hanging fruit of the ways that we should be spending our time. And then we're going to break it down into what do we need to do each day, each hour, each day, each week, whatever it might be, to accomplish the strategies that we've agreed make the most sense. So for some people, they have to go out and meet strangers, and it's networking, and that's where you have to start out sometimes. There's other lawyers where they have a significant network and they haven't tapped into it because they really don't know how. So the idea that we're going to write a strategy talking about reaching back to all of these law firm contacts, law school contacts, friends from intramural softball, whatever it might be, and we're going to reach out and meet with them as a way to start figuring out who's valuable, who's not, be friends with all of them, but people have different values based on the business they're in, the role they're in, whatever it might be. And that's going to be a better use of time than networking, meeting strangers, but they're both still relevant directions that someone may have to go as a new attorney.
So I was the education coordinator for my networking group for 3 out of the last 4 years. So I'm going to give you some of the basic things that I taught in my 4-minute educational sessions. And then maybe we'll riff a little bit on those. So one of the things I really like, because people often didn't know where to start. So I would say, I forget whose it is now. I'll claim it's mine. The 1, 1, and 1 strategy. So you pick one business group. Maybe for an attorney, it's the Bar Association or AJA or whatever it is. And one passion area. So let's say, God forbid, you lost a family member to cancer. So there's a cancer run that caught your interest and you participated in. They're probably desperate for someone to join the board and help with marketing or PR, or maybe you could write the legal contracts every year and look at the risk involved. And so you pick one business, one personal passion, and then maybe one a little bit more personal. You're going to be on the committee for your kids' soccer team or something like that.
Yeah, pick a sport or something that's something you enjoy.
You play on the company softball team and you're going to get on the committee and meet all the other softball teams. Well, guess what? That's great for networking and for meeting other referring attorneys and things like that. So what do you think about the one business, one passion, and one personal, and just get involved once a month? You're going to go to these networking groups.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a great starting point. The only caveat or add on would be if there are opportunities to go where your targets are, that's always going to be advised. So like, for example, when I was starting my business in 2004 and I was going to join chambers of commerce, right? Because that's what I was doing at the time. There's one that I called and they primarily were retail and I'm B2B. And so she said, mostly people there are retail. And I said, well, all right, maybe that's not for me. So I think it's a good idea to talk with the person that's running the cancer group or the whatever it is, events that you're thinking of going to or groups you're looking to join, and ask a series of questions to understand, is this where the business is? Is this where the people who could refer business would be? And again, I don't think that's everything, because you could still develop relationships with people who have connections in different places. But ultimately, I think it's maybe a little bit of a shortcut than picking 3 that might not be as qualified with potential as others.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great point, because I spent a lot of time in a local networking group that was very valuable for me for my personal home care, because I got to know a local plumber and a local air conditioning company and a local roofer. But now I'm spending a lot of time in groups like Provisors, which has a national footprint. It's lawyers and accountants is the majority of the members. It's great because I'm getting introduced to folks all across the country who are looking for help with their marketing and their attorneys. Guess what? Hey, great fit for what Jay does.
Highly targeted for folks like you and I.
Yeah. So the second advice that I always give, and we learned a lot in our networking groups, is the value of one-on-ones. And again, for someone just starting out, or even someone who's coming back to networking, trying to build their book of business, most of us are very familiar with this term, the one-on-one. And basically what you do is you book a coffee or a Zoom if you're not in the same city, or I'd love to break bread and go for lunch, and whatever is most convenient for the two partners, and just get to know each other a little bit and get to know a little bit about their business, make sure they ask you a little bit about your business, and find out what a good introduction or a good referral is for them. And the one-on-one is the first step towards that relationship building. So I'll let you riff on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think there's the relationship side, and then there's the potential qualifying side. And I like to mesh them together. So I want to build a relationship with everyone I'm meeting one-on-one, no doubt, because if they're not valuable as a connector, they're valuable as a friend. And you always want to make friends anywhere and everywhere you go. And you never know what someone might run into. However, the twist that I provide to my clients and that I talk about regularly in my writing and on my podcast is the importance of asking questions and really qualifying, is this someone I can help? And is this someone that can help me? And if so, can I test them out? Like, can I say, hey, I'm going to give you this contact, and then they're going to offer me a contact. And did they follow up? Did they actually execute on the things that they had promised? It's like the Seinfeld, you're a Seinfeld fan. It's like the car rental company. They took the reservation, but you didn't keep the reservation. And that's kind of the most important part. There
Yeah.
are people who are excellent at organization and following through and doing what they say. And then you start to realize there's a whole segment of the population that's really, really bad at that skill. And that skill is pretty important because if you're looking for someone that's going to routinely refer you and that you're going to be able to refer back, you want someone that's organized enough to do it properly. So I think there's some
Great point.
qualifying
Yeah.
that's going on as well in that meeting. And there's a question I want to share with you and your audience that I think is really, really helpful. So let's say I'm meeting with you and you do different things than I do in legal. And I say, Jay, you know, in an average year, and this is not the first question, by the way, this is way near the end of the meeting. Jay, in an average year, how often are you running into lawyers that really aren't looking for what you do, but they really need more of what I do? Is that a lot? Is that a few times? Whatever. And then based on your answer, that might also help me understand, is Jay someone I need to grab on with both hands and hang tight? Or is Jay someone I should just be friends with, and as things kind of pass through our lives, think of each other? But it's not someone that I necessarily need to stay tight with every single month, because 5 or 10 clients a year is very different than, oh, I run into that maybe once every 5 years. So I think there's some qualifying questions that are really helpful to figure out who you want to invest more time with and maybe who you just want to see occasionally or stay friends.
Now, I ended up hanging out with a lot of personal injury lawyers. I was at a private mastermind last week with about 100 of the top PI lawyers in the country. And next week I'll be at National Trial Lawyers speaking, and we have a booth and everything. So if you're coming to NTL, say hi. What do you say for the personal injury lawyers? Because it's a little different than attorneys who build those long-term relationships and do the same kind of service and have the same kind of referral partners.
Yeah. Since most personal injury attorneys are focused on marketing and SEO and pay-per-click and all that social media marketing, which I think is great, there's others that don't want to compete against the 1,000-pound gorillas or whatever we want to call them. So I work with personal injury attorneys to help them develop relationships with referral partners. So that could be criminal attorneys, that could be other litigators, that could be chiropractors, doctors, auto body shops, like whatever it is, where you're figuring out, like, again, who can send you multiple matters, larger matters a year, and maybe who can't. Not all lawyers and people are created equal as it relates to running into personal injury matters, right? Like I run into a couple personal injury matters a year as an individual working within the legal space. But there are other people that run into it 5, 10, 15, 20 times a year. Those are, again, the ones that you're going to want to hold close and keep tight and make sure that you keep them safe, because they're the ones who are going to end up helping you grow your law practice. So I do believe in business development and marketing working together, but I'm going to help personal injury attorneys more on the BD side than on the marketing side. Maybe otherwise it's a little bit of social media and content creation, but I do believe that plays a role for many personal injury attorneys in their success.
So one last thought starter for folks just ramping up their networking, and that's the concept of know, like, and trust. And people have probably heard about it, but the one thing I encourage folks to be is patient. If you join these networking groups and you have that one-on-one with people, my friend Lenny Sklar taught me, one-on-one is not a noun, it's a verb, and you have multiple one-on-ones. And you get a chance at maybe your networking group has a cocktail party, or we went axe throwing last month, different things like that. You go to a ball game or something. Over time, and it takes about a year till somebody really gets to, okay, I get it. He's a coach and he works one-on-one with lawyers and he teaches them how to do. It takes a couple of hits till people actually get it. They realize they like you and they trust you. And then you get those referrals. So the most important thing is a little bit of patience. What do you comment on that?
I think patience combined with, again, intelligent qualifying, because if you're getting to know a lot of people, great. I think you can build your network wide and everybody knows you, and that takes a year, that takes time. And then there's other scenarios where, again, asking some pointed questions and proactively connecting and helping others, get them on your podcast, get them on a panel, make an introduction. Where's your son going to college? Oh, do you need an advisor? Like whatever it is that we can do to add value for others as a way of sort of demonstrating, hey, I'm here to play ball. I'm here to be your friend, yes, but I'm also here to help you advance your interests. And if you're doing that with the right people, the right way, the right amount of times, and then qualifying them that they have the capacity and interest in reciprocating, you're just learning more about people than meeting multiple times. I mean, I used to do that. Like I would meet with someone 3, 4, 5 times and then never get a thing. And I'd wonder why, because I was giving them a ton. And it's because they didn't have the capacity. They didn't even have the mental capacity, the organizational capacity, or they weren't running in anyone that would ever use me. So I think it's
I love
important
that.
to think about networking as a way to, it's almost like dating, right? I mean, if we want to look at it that way, you can go and date someone 3 times, but if you go on 3 dates and you go, you know what, under no circumstances is this someone I'm going to marry after 3 dates. Okay, so you tried, and now you move on to someone else and you start dating someone else. But you have to kind of go through the numbers to see who you want to really bring into your circle or who you want to kind of leave out of your circle. And sometimes it takes 1 meeting and sometimes it takes a year.
Yeah, I've been married for 27 years, so I can hardly remember, but I remember there used to be something about if you 1 date, 3 dates, 3 weeks, 3 months, that you'd hit these milestones and you'd know, okay, maybe this is worth hitting the next milestone.
Yeah.
But I love that about really focusing in and qualifying the folks, at least in your head, and saying, hey, this is someone who they did follow up on the thing they said, and they do have the wherewithal to make some connections. And I also love what you said about asking really good questions, because you want to also help them. And if you ask really good questions, like where's your son going to college, or you're working on any projects, or what's next for your business, and finding out where you can help, and then you can provide value. And there's incredible value in that law of reciprocity, where when you do what you say you did, then they feel like, hey, now I've got to do what I say I'd do for Jay or Steve.
Exactly. I mean, I ran a troika this morning, and I run a very organized troika. I teach troikas for providers all over the country. And I've been doing that for about a year. And the troika that I set was, we're going to break up our talk time. We're going to really focus on how we can help each other. And then the last 10 minutes of our meeting, we're going to think about how we can add value for each other. It doesn't have to be a piece of business. I mean, we just met 20 minutes ago. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
We need to give something of value as a way of demonstrating A, caring, and B, that we have the capacity to give and the interest to give. So one of them, I gave a video that I did on LinkedIn best practices, because quite frankly, his LinkedIn was non-existent. And as an up and coming young lawyer, this is how he's being judged by the community, is like, what's your LinkedIn? And so I just gave him a video that I thought would be super helpful.
I love it.
And the other one, I'm like, he's a realtor. How do I help a realtor? Well, I have to look for a real estate attorney or an estate planning attorney in the DC area. And I already have reached out to a few and said, hey, do you want to meet this great realtor? So I'm doing what I say, and I'm hoping that they're going to understand, like, that's a big part of what makes this whole thing work and tick.
Now, all these people are sitting on the edge of their seat. What is that LinkedIn video? So definitely send us the link, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah.
And everyone can build a great LinkedIn. So thank you so much. I think we gave some great content about networking for a young attorney or someone starting out. Now I want you to hit with your best advice for the sophisticated attorney, the guy who's built a large firm. What's a high-end tip for a great rainmaker?
Well, so one of the benefits of interviewing hundreds of rainmakers on my podcast, and I also run some peer advisory groups, Rainmaker Roundtable. So I have that advantage of all this happening. The one thing that keeps coming across that the rainmakers and the people that are building really strong businesses is, you have to have a right hand. You have to have a lieutenant. You cannot wear 5 or 10 hats. It's not going to work. You're not going to be successful doing it. It goes across the board. There's no one that I've met that is highly successful that's doing business development, billing 3,000 hours, managing a team, doing the admin, right? Handling the marketing. It just doesn't happen. So we've got to find a way to either say, look, I want to build a business. I'm going to delegate the work. I'm not going to practice the law like I used to. If you need me for advice or to bring me in on a high profile case, great. I've got to leverage the team. And so the people that treat the business of law as a business, and the people that can figure out how to delegate, especially to that right, those are the ones that end up being the most successful, whether they're building hundreds of $1 million firms or $1 million firm. That seems to be the one thing they have in common, is their ability to say, hey, I'm going to wear 1 or 2 hats, and that's it. Everything else needs to be moved on to other people I can trust.
Yeah, I keep referencing this book I recently read, Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time.
Buy back your time, yeah.
And
Or what is it? Who, not how?
Yeah, Who Not
Right.
How, Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
And the concept is that there's things that you're not as passionate about and not as good at. And when you get someone else to do it, but the one thing that I really took from Martell's book that I just keep telling myself now over and over and over is 80% done is 100% awesome. Because when you're a perfectionist, like most of us are, and you hire an assistant or even a lot of your employees, they're not going to do it as good as you. But accepting that and accepting that 80% done times one assistant or 10 employees is 100% awesome, because they got it done, and you can course correct if it's serious, and you can retrain a little bit if it needs to get better. But now it's released me from requiring perfection in everything that everybody touches, or not perfection, but just doing it exactly the way I would do it. And getting it done is fantastic. As a matter of fact, Steve and I even had a little bobble in setting up this meeting from one of our assistants. No names will be mentioned. And we got on the phone, we course corrected, and here we are with hopefully super valuable content for everybody listening. And as a matter of fact, if you're listening this long, you obviously liked it. So another thing that's a big part of your business, and you mentioned that you do this training, and it generally runs about a year, I guess, where you teach the folks to sell without selling. And then you move into peer advisory groups. And I love my mastermind. Folks, regular listeners have heard me talk about the power of masterminds. We've done a webinar on masterminds. You got to check that out if you haven't seen it. But talk about the power of the peer advisory groups and how that's structured and what the benefits are.
Yeah, there's a saying I heard recently, you can't read the label from the inside of the bottle. And I think it's so true that we get into grooves running a law practice, running a business, coaching, whatever it is. We're not, my marketing, I have got an individual that I've known for a while that's going to just spend a few hours like going and digging in at my marketing. And everyone loves my marketing. Everywhere I go, people, Fretzin, you love your marketing, great. But I'm not seeing it the way I need to see it. So the idea behind peer advisory is, look, if you have a good facilitator and you have really good quality people in a group, and you allow them to be open and vulnerable and interested in each other, and they know it's a confidential group where it's safe, and they're away from their firm, they're in a room with other very bright people that have all sort of made it in different ways. One made it on being an amazing content producer, another one made it on being an amazing rainmaker, another one a great manager. Whatever it is that they're bringing to the table, there's a lot of power in that shared knowledge and in the ability for them to work together to solve problems, to share best practices. And so I just have really, really always wanted to run Rainmaker groups, and I just held off for too long. And of course, as we all do, we all, kick ourselves, but I've been doing it for about 5 years. I have 40, 50 members. And I'm wondering, like, when are they going to quit? Like, when is someone just going to drop out and say, this isn't for me anymore? And they just keep coming back month after month, because I think they get that family away from their firm or family away from their family. And it's hard to leave a group where you feel so connected. And I don't know that everybody's getting that. I mean, that's not for everybody, but it is interesting that once people are in them, they really feel attached.
Yeah, there's so many questions that you don't want to ask your number two. You don't want to ask your vice president, because maybe the issue is your vice president.
Yeah.
And so the mastermind or the peer advisory group becomes like your virtual board of directors.
Yes.
And you ask a jury of your peers, my director of this or my vice president of that, are they really working? And here's my problems. And maybe they give you a course correction, or maybe they convince you that it's time to move on.
Yeah. And big decisions. There are big decisions being made about scaling, about should I leave this firm and take my book and go somewhere else? Should I fire this person? I mean, there's all these big decisions, and it's not that the answers are being given, but there's questions being asked to ferret everything out so that we truly understand what's going on behind the scenes with this individual in their situation. And then suggestions are given. And then there's even the accountability that you're going to take a couple of those suggestions and take action between, say, now and the next meeting. And so then they have to report to the group, like, what did I do with the time that was given to me? So I actually moved the needle on something important. And it's just, I think everybody sort of feels really excited about what they're going to hear when they give advice and then someone took it, and how that changes people's lives. It's like everyone gets to be a coach for a day or a coach for a year or whatever. It's just fun.
Yeah. I mean, so many times the room, 2 or 3 people in the room have been through exactly what you're experiencing on the first time for your business.
Yeah.
Give you advice. And like you said, if you come back next month or next quarter and you didn't take that advice, the jury of your peers will definitely hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Smart people is great to have in the room. Well, awesome, Steve. I think we come to that time. And I told you many, many famous podcasters have answered these questions over the years. I call them my one-liners or my quick snappers. So first one, what apps or techniques do you use for personal productivity?
For personal productivity, I love my Remarkable too. I'm 100% paper free. I don't have any paper anywhere near me. And I don't think people realize how wonderful it can feel to have everything digital and have everything in the cloud and saved and preserved. And so when I need to pull up a folder about a conversation I have, it's just all in one tablet. I don't have a file cabinet and all that.
Right.
So I would say for me, that's been an absolute game changer.
And the Remarkable allows you to write in handwriting and then it types it for you.
I don't
Essentially.
really use that because my handwriting's
Yeah.
absolute trash. But what I do is I'm able to have folders on every client, on every conversation, every podcast that I'm able to go back to. If I want to email myself a message or some things to follow up on it with the Troika, I just email that to myself. Now it's sitting in my inbox and I can deal with it that way. And it feels like paper. So it's, for me, I tried it on an iPad. It didn't take. And this is an expensive scalpel a surgeon should have.
By the way, if folks heard the term Troika and Provisors, Steve and I are both members of this group, and Provisors is a pretty advanced, pretty sophisticated networking group for attorneys and accountants and professionals. And it's very good. It's national in scope. So check it out if that sounds like a fit for you. And a Troika is, I think, the only place I've heard it, that term is Provisors, because I use the term one-on-one, which I think comes out of BNI and lots of other networking groups. But Provisors saves you a little time and puts 3 people together. Every month, you proactively organize a Troika and you have a 3-way lunch or coffee or Zoom. And so it has a little bit of dynamic to it that works really well as well. Next question, best business books.
For the small business owner, I would say Traction, the Gino Wickman book, is fantastic. I still to this day use many of the tools that I learned from that book and from working with EOS. And then another one that I'm a big time management fan. So Getting Things Done, David Allen, I give that book out with all my materials to my clients with the hope that they're going to read that book because it is a game changer from a standpoint of just winging it to actually having a process for how you manage your time. And lawyers who don't manage their time and have their time organized, it's confusing to me because that's in many cases how they're making money. So go figure.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about EOS and the book Traction on this show. And I always like to also share this book, Get a Grip, also by Gino Wickman. But if you're the visionary, if you're the founder of your firm, read Get a Grip because Traction's hard to slog through. It includes all the details of the program. And that's really for your integrator, for more like the COO, Chief Operating Officer personality. So Get a Grip and Traction, I love them. And we're running the EOS system. We're really, really enamored. Blogs, podcasts, and YouTubes, what things do you subscribe to? And each week when it hits your feed, you stop everything else and open that one up.
It's just so funny that you mentioned that we might be auditory because I really don't read newsletters. I unsubscribe from just about every newsletter I get. And it's really about taking in content via video. And I love audio. So I would say podcasts right now, Modern Wisdom is really good, Prof G. And then there's one that most people don't know about that's really cool called Under the Influence. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
It sounds like it's something like around alcohol, but it's not. It's essentially about advertising, about the advertising space. And so the guy walks you through all these different products and services and how they came to be and how did Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola and McDonald's, and he's got all these kitschy things, but it's just a really well-produced show about advertising called Under the Influence. Really cool.
Love it. Thanks for sharing. So we're almost at the very end. What's a great introduction for you? If someone's listening to Steve and thinking, hey, this guy sounds super smart, who should they introduce to you and who can you help with your business?
I mean, I'm international in scope. I'm working with big law firm lawyers and solos and every practice area. So really what I think it makes sense is people that are in some form of transition in their life. They want to make equity partner and they haven't been able to get the numbers up. People that move laterally, people that go out on their own, and just folks that are they look at 2024 and they go, am I just going to do this again? Like it's the same old every year. I need to get from $500,000 to $1 million and then to 2 and then to 3. And those are the folks I work with. I only work with about 20 lawyers a year. So I'm handpicking the best and brightest as they're handpicking me. And that way we know a coach and a player that, Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson, however you want to put it together. That's the kind of combination I'm looking for to get the wins that I'm looking for out of the people I work with.
Yeah, I can see from your background, you're a big Knicks fan.
Right. I like watching the Bulls beat the Knicks. Yeah, that
He's
was one of
got
my favorites.
a Michael Jordan shirt in the background.
Yeah.
Love it. I learned a lesson from Jordan real quick. Was in Toronto, and I was the brand manager for Sprite. And so we had a bunch of tickets for the first year of the Toronto Raptors. And we drafted this great young rookie, Damon Stoudemire. So the whole first half, Stoudemire was trying to cover Jordan, and he was working his butt off. And he held him to about 10 points, and he worked so hard. But the whole first half, Jordan was driving the basket. And Stoudemire had pretty quick hands, so he held him to about 10. Second half, Jordan would fake driving to the basket, hit a fadeaway, and ended up with about 47.
Yeah,
I learned from the master that day, and then Damon Stoudemire learned from the master.
He got conditioned in that first half.
Yeah.
It didn't end up too well for him.
Yeah, if you're a basketball person, you can appreciate it. It was so funny. And last question, where can people get in touch with you?
I mean, I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm all over the internet. If you just type in Steve Fretzin, you'll find me. And my website's fretzin.com, FRETZIN.com. And, my goal is to, yes, work with 20 lawyers a year, but then my real goal is to work and help all the lawyers across the world learn the skills that they didn't learn in law school through my content, podcasts, books, articles, whatever. I write for Above the Law, so you can check out my column there. But it's really about how are we leaving this industry better than we found it, and helping people to really be successful in their careers. So that's really my goal. And I know that when I do that, and I'm doing it as well as anybody, that positive things happen.
Steve, this was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And I think our folks got some top off on some of the strategies. So thank you so much for your time, and it was great.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. Please send questions and comments to podcast@10goldenrules.com. That is podcast@TENgoldenrules.com.